Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Welcome to More Than the Score 2021. I'm Althea Brooks, and I'm Senior Director of Lifetime Learning in the Office of Engagement. And we partner with the Alumni Association to bring you More Than the Score. And this is our first More Than the Score since 2021. Woo! In person, I should say. We had virtual programs last year. So this year we have 4 in-person programs, and we've partnered with the Miller Center for 2 virtual programs in September. We hope you join us for all of our More Than a Score programs this year. We're thrilled to offer you this lecture on Skyscraper Gothic, the creation of American identity, as our first More Than a Score back in person. Special welcome to the 400 plus guests that have registered from across the country for the live stream of this program as well. We have a stellar panel for UVA faculty. We have a stellar panel right here for this of UVA faculty plus a UVA student who will be joining them for this wonderful conversation. You're invited to meet our panel at the Fralin Museum after this talk, to walk through the exhibit and ask additional questions. We hope you will take advantage of this opportunity to meet the curators of the exhibit. Before we begin, please silence your phones, and we ask that you hold your questions to the end. Our panel will take as many questions as time permits. We've placed 2 microphones right here, so we ask that you step up to the microphones and ask just one question, please. State your name and your UVA affiliation. Special thanks to the UVA bookstore. Bookstore's over here. They'll be selling Lisa Rowley's book at the end of the program, and she'll sign some copies as well. Now to introduce our moderator for the conversation. Matthew McClendon is an art historian and curator of modern and contemporary art. He became the J. Sanford Miller Family Director and Chief Curator of the Fralin Museum of Art at UVA in 2017. Since coming to Fralin, Matthew has focused on activating the museum both within the university community and the wider community served. Under his leadership, the museum has seen a record increase in attendance as well as the development of a number of new programs. Among these programs are the Greenbrier Global Artists, an after-school program serving children of refugees. Also, the Fralin Downtown, a partnership with the Violet Crown Cinema Group for a series of monthly films and documentaries addressing both the visual and the performing arts. Before coming to Fralin, Matthew was recruited by the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art. It's a state art museum of Florida under the support of the Florida State University. He was brought there to revive its dormant modern and contemporary program. Matthew has served as teaching faculty for graduate and undergraduate students at Florida State University, New College of Florida, Rollins College. He earned his MA and his PhD from Calded Institute of Art of the University of London. Please help me thank Matthew for moderating this conversation and help me welcome this wonderful panel to More Than the Score.
Thank you so much, Althea. We are all thrilled to be here today. I think I can hear me. Can you all hear me all right? Yes? Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you to our great sound engineers in the back. I will just give some brief intros for my fellow panelists to remind everyone of how fantastic this panel is this morning, and then we'll move into the discussion about the history and exhibition. So to my left, I'm joined by Lisa Riley. Lisa Riley's chief research interest is in medieval visual culture. Her most recent book, The Invention of Norman Visual Culture, Art, Politics, and Dynastic Ambition, published by Cambridge University Press, establishes a new interpretive paradigm for the 11th and 12th century art and architecture of the Norman world in France, England, and Sicily. And importantly for us today, she and her colleague at Vanderbilt, Kevin Murphy, co-edited a collection of essays, hold it up, Lisa, Skyscraper Gothic, published by UVA Press, which of course led to the exhibition we are discussing today. In 2018, she was awarded the Jefferson Scholars Foundation Award for Excellence in Teaching. Lisa held the NEH Horace Goldsmith Distinguished Teaching Chair of Art and Architectural History from 1999 to 2002, and has just been named Commonwealth Professor of Architectural History here at UVA. Hi, Lisa. Yay! Next, we have Brianna DeMann. Brianna is a fourth-year undergraduate in the School of Architecture at the University of Virginia, studying architectural history and archaeology. With a concentration in historic preservation, Brianna is deeply interested in recording and communicating stories of underrepresented populations through local resources and individual narratives. She has worked with UVA Library Scholars Lab, National Geographic Society Fund, and local historical societies to make the rich history and material culture of Central Virginia publicly available through 3D scanning and digitization. At present, Brianna is the project manager of a local nonprofit, One Shared Story, while in the process of writing her undergraduate thesis, which will be on the Woolworth Building, right? Yes, great. Brianna has been involved in many stages of the research and design leading up to this exhibition. Thank you for joining us, Brianna DeMann. And next we have Elgin Cleckley. Elgin Cleckley is an assistant professor of architecture and design thinking in the School of Architecture at UVA with an appointment in the School of Education and Human Development and the School of Nursing. He is a designer and principal of Empathic Design, an award-winning design thinking pedagogy, initiative, and professional practice. After studying architecture at the University of Virginia and Princeton University, he's collaborated with numerous architecture and design firms, both in the United States and Canada. Before joining UVA's design thinking program in 2016, he was the 3D group leader and design coordinator at the Ontario Science Centre in Toronto. Elgin is the recent winner of the 2021 UVA Alumni Board of Trustees Teaching Award, one of the highest honors offered at the university. So we are so thrilled to have you with us too, Elgin. So, as Althea said, I'm the director of the Fralin Museum of Art, and it's the beautiful exhibition, Skyscraper Gothic, that has brought us all here today. We are so excited to be talking about this exhibition with you, not only because it's stunning and beautiful, but it adds an important layer of scholarship to an under-researched area of architectural history, and also represents a sustained partnership with our faculty colleagues in the architecture school, and because of the level of student involvement that provided real-world design experience for our students. The results, as you will see when you visit the exhibition, are truly remarkable, and for me, as a museum director at an academic museum, really have become the model of how we want to work with our faculty and student colleagues moving forward to engage and enliven the museum and enliven the curriculum here at UVA across disciplines, and we'll be talking about that today. Behind us, hopefully, yes, you'll see a rotating slideshow of various aspects of the design process and the exhibition itself, as well as the numerous students, that's what's behind me right now, who have taken part in the run-up to the exhibition and the design and research of the exhibition. So I think we'll start with you, Lisa, and just to give everyone here a basic overview of the exhibition, what the theme, the subject matter of the exhibition is, a little bit about the genesis, and what people will see when they actually come and visit the Fralin.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and I'm just thrilled that so many people turned out here and virtually for this discussion, because these really are, in addition to buildings that I think tell an important story, they really are some of my favorite buildings from when I was a pretty young child, as somebody who I think was found
Yep. Did we lose her mic?
Who grew up in the New York area. And I'll just say a little bit about how the exhibit came about, which really started in the late 90s. When I happened to be standing outside the Woolworth Building for some reason in New York, looking at it, and as Matthew said, I'm a medievalist, and I was looking at it thinking, these are really weird motifs from the Middle Ages that they picked. They're not the kind of standard, typical ones you might want to have. I wonder what's on with this, what's up with this. And my colleague, Kevin Murphy, who's the co-curator, who's now at Vanderbilt, he was a modernist in the department, and we were talking about it and decided to teach a graduate seminar on these buildings, looking at them from both a modern and medieval perspective. That's really how it all started. And learning at that moment that the Woolworth Building really wasn't looking at cathedrals at all. Cass Gilbert, the architect, was really interested in tracing the roots of capitalism. Do I need to do something with my mic? Okay. Tracing the roots of capitalism, and was imitating buildings from Northwest France and Flanders that were seen as the original capitalist building, like the Ypres Cloth Hall and things like that. And also combined with travel to that area, that was seen as better as well. Let me use this instead. All right. How's that? Good? Okay, great. And so we taught this course with graduate students in 1997 that began this, and several of the essays in the book are written by the students from that class. And that's really how it all started. And through that class, we realized that these skyscrapers, which are largely ignored by the dominant narrative of architectural history at this point, in favor of modernism, in favor of international style buildings, were in fact buildings that captivated the popular imagination in a way that I really don't think a group of buildings have before or since. They were hugely, hugely popular, as you'll see in the exhibition, and permeated every aspect of daily life, from games, toys, textiles, cocktail shakers, silverware, music, dance, everything participated in this, because it was seen as this moment when a distinct American type of building emerged. You know, the skyscraper emerges in the United States. There's some debate as to which is the first skyscraper, but it was definitely in the United States, and it was seen as something distinctly American, capturing this moment when America is becoming an urban society. People are moving to cities, becoming more urban, leaving behind rural life. The nature of work was changing substantially during this time. All this is represented by these buildings, also made possible by remarkable technological developments like the Bessemer steel process, all made possible by American technological know-how and innovation. So you'll also see in the exhibit that people from around the world, Italian futurists in particular, were obsessed with these as embodying the sense of modernity and speed and technological innovation. And they really become a metaphor for modern life and the kind of urban experience. And although they begin in New York and Chicago, very rapidly, cities across the country imitate the forms of these skyscrapers, particularly once New York puts in its zoning code that requires a setback form, a kind of step profile to the buildings in order to protect air and space and light down below. That zoning code leads to a distinctive type of building, which then cities are imitating because they want to look like New York and Chicago. They see this as the most modern and the association with business. And we also see in these buildings, this is the beginning of when we have iconic buildings associated with corporations. You know, F.W. Woolworth is nothing if not a shrewd businessman, and he makes the most out of his commission of that building, publicizing it greatly at its opening. President Wilson actually turns the lights on from Washington in this highly publicized opening ceremony, and it becomes, you know, the image of the Woolworth Corporation, and then invoked, as you'll see, in advertising by other companies throughout. So, you know, it was really just this moment when architecture becomes so integrated into all aspects of American life that we realized through our initial seminar that led us to this work. And then having talked to Matthew after the book came out about the possibility of doing an exhibition, there were opportunities for further student involvement, both through research seminars where the students did a lot of the background work at the point where we had a tentative checklist, and then through the course that I taught with my colleague Elgin Cleckley, they worked on the design of the exhibit as well, and its organization into 4 major parts: the introduction, a section on the buildings, replication, which is where you see some of the really fabulous objects that came out of this desire to incorporate these motifs in furniture and everyday objects. And then finally a section on construction, because it's also a moment where construction workers become heroes. You know, many of you have probably seen those Louis B. Hines terrifying images of people eating lunch on beams dangling in space. You know, and he talks about how terrified he was as he spent 6 months climbing up with the construction workers at the Empire State Building. But there's this kind of heroicization that takes place of construction workers, but also by some artists as the Depression begins to emerge, of the disparities that urban life makes so apparent as well. So we try to capture all of that in the exhibition, and the students did this great job of helping us think through how to create the 4 sections and then how to display them as well. And that's what you'll see when you go to the exhibition today or at another time.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Before we move on to Brianna and talking about some of that student involvement, one of the things that I wanted to highlight in what you mentioned, and one of the questions I get and my colleagues at the museum get most often, is how long did this exhibition take to create and plan and bring to fruition? And you've just heard the genesis of the idea of this exhibition began in the 1990s with the first kind of realization as Lisa's walking by a building that I'm sure you had seen many times at that point, and you know, being struck for the first time, this is odd. Teaching a course in the 90s with Kevin, running up to the publication of the book 4 years ago, 3 years ago, almost? Yeah, so, and it was right in the final stages of the book that I came to UVA, started to get to know Lisa. She told me about this fascinating project. As a shrewd museum director, I thought everyone likes skyscrapers. That sounds great. And toys. This sounds fantastic. Tell me more. And then it's been for the last almost 4 years that we've been partnering on this project to bring to fruition what you see in the galleries today. And I think people don't necessarily always understand the timeline that museums work under. The exhibitions that you go to see, whether at the Fralin or at any other museum, art museum in the world, frequently have been in the works for at least 3 or 4 years. If it's a major exhibition with loans from all over the world, hundreds of objects, that curator or team of curators could have been working on that exhibition for a decade or more. So think about that. I think that adds a layer of real interest as you walk in and understand, you know, just how long it takes to, as a good friend of mine says, have these ideas steep in the back of your mind before they actually show up in the space and on the wall. But I do want to turn to Brianna and talk about one of the, I think, distinguishing characteristics of this exhibition, which we're really holding up now as a working model moving forward for a university academic museum to bring the intellectual capital and resources, both from the faculty and students and the museum professionals, together to create projects moving forward. And Brianna has been with this from, I will say, the second phase. Since the first phase was in the 90s, Brianna was not around then at UVA, or possibly even born. But in the second phase, Brianna has been instrumental in all aspects. So could you talk to us, sorry, not to embarrass you. I've now become, or us, it's more embarrassing, it's right, it's more embarrassing for us, Brianna, trust me. Talk to us a little bit about how you started out in the project and kind of the stages that you've been involved with throughout.
Yeah, I came into this project in my very small capacity in the fall of 2019 with Professor Riley's Skyscraper Research Seminar, which was a very pivotal moment for me. I just joined the School of Architecture and the Architectural History program, and this really cemented how much I love what I'm studying and how passionate I am about not only uncovering these narratives, but making sure that other people have the opportunity to hopefully experience them in the same joyous and exciting way that I have the opportunity to every day. And in that class, I had the opportunity to write a really, really awesome paper about the impact of these skyscraper designs and motifs on silver specifically. And that's genuinely still the best piece of writing I have done here at this university.
Right.
Yes, but the Woolworth Building will be better. But from that, I then, the next semester, spring of 2020, was in the co-taught seminar with Professor Cleckley and Professor Riley. And that really took the research that we'd done in the previous course, as well as obviously the incredible research that Lisa and Kevin had already completed, and transformed that into a physical experience and a narrative that one could walk through. And as a historian predominantly, this was a very new opportunity for me, and it's been incredibly enlightening in terms of understanding how broad the visitorship to a museum is, how many perspectives you have to take in order to embody what a child will see when they come into this museum, what somebody who has been a member of the Fralin for a couple decades will think when they come in, and how we can balance those expectations and make sure that everybody gets a valuable experience and take something important and maybe learn something when they come out of this exhibition. And like I said, as a historian, it's really the best opportunity to be able to make something and share it with a public. That's all I'm really interested in, is sharing stories, and this is an incredibly tangible way to do that. And then finally, I also was an intern this last summer, working on some of the archival materials and sorting through a lot of the text so that we could put that all together when the exhibition came to fruition. But yeah, overall, I've spent a year on this exhibition, which in my very small time frame feels like a lot, and waiting a year to see it come and be realized has been just the craziest opportunity. I really can't express how thankful I am to everybody here for making this something that I can, walk into the museum and see my fingerprints on and see some piece of silver that I fell in love with, and now get to watch other people maybe not lose their minds as much as I do, but appreciate it and, see it for the incredible piece of work and influenced piece of art that it is.
So Brianna wasn't aware that this was an audition for her today. I'll now be taking her on the road with me for all fundraising activities for the museum moving forward. That was so beautifully. Thank you, Brianna, for hitting every point that, as a museum director at the University of Virginia, I wanted to make. That was really beautiful. I'm curious, and we've talked a lot already, but I don't know. So you've gone from that first course on researching skyscrapers through the design course, and now you're coming to approaching a very important moment in any young scholar's life, which is your undergraduate thesis, and you've decided to work on the Woolworth Building. One of the great, for any architects in the audience today or on viewing us online, one of the great moments in this exhibition are these. There aren't enough adjectives to describe these drawings from the office of Cass Gilbert of the Woolworth Building. Hand drawings, massive. And that's what Brianna is going to be working on. These drawings, it's one of those great museum stories. They were in someone's attic for 50 years or so. So Brianna is really one of the first scholars that will be looking at these drawings in a very detailed way. So I'm wondering if you had any idea in that first class that this would be your trajectory, or what is it about this material that has made it so important and close to you that you want to now do your major undergraduate thesis on it?
Realistically, in the simplest of terms, I have completely fallen head over heels for Art Deco as a style and for skyscrapers as an incredibly multifaceted sort of zeitgeist moment in the early 20th century. As Lisa says, and as hopefully you'll hear many times, this is such a watershed moment for architecture to permeate culture the way it does, and to look and find the skyscraper everywhere you can turn. When doing this research and internship in the summer, tires are advertised with the Woolworth Building, silverware, furniture, clothing, hairstyles, dance. Like, it's impossible to capture how singularly focused it appears that culture is on the skyscraper. And really, it's not something I'm looking to let go of. I'm excited to keep working on this in any capacity, really. And these drawings are stunning, and it also plays really well into my love for working with 3D modeling and digitization, in that I'm hoping to be able to recreate some of these spaces and make them accessible again to the public, because unfortunately the Woolworth Building is not open to the public anymore, and these interiors are impossibly stunning, and they should be available to anybody who has even an inkling of passion for what an Art Deco building looks like, or what the Woolworth company was up to, and how they represented themselves as a capitalist business. So.
Right. That's great. I think you bring up another important point that I want to make clear. Some of the drawings that you'll be seeing, and some of the drawings in the larger collection that's now housed at Vanderbilt, are of spaces that didn't come to fruition or have changed, dramatically over the years. So that digitization is so important. The recreation through digitization, the digital humanities is something that UVA really has pioneered and excelled at. Lisa and Elgin are both a big part of that, and I think that's where we'll kind of move into next. But so exciting for Brianna as a fourth year to be able to bring her already considerable experience with this material to bear, to really open up dialogue and possibilities about these spaces in the future. So we're glad you're not letting go of it too, Brianna. Thank you. And then I want to bring in our fabulous colleague, Elgin Cleckley, into the conversation. As you heard in the introduction, Elgin has a wide-ranging background in both architecture, design, and importantly, museum design. And this was the second or third, this design course, and I want to underline that the design decisions that you see in the exhibition, the design decisions that you're seeing in the photographs that are scrolling behind us, all of those design decisions came out of student work from this course. So Elgin, if you could talk a little bit about the process of the course. I think this is the second kind of course like this in a way, using design thinking, that you and Lisa have co-taught, if I'm correct. So just give us a sense of how you're bringing your background to bear in the classroom and opening up these possibilities for our students and for the museum.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you very much. Hello, fellow Who's, class of 93. Anyone's in the room at Year 4. I have to be honest, I get emotional listening to Brianna talk about your experience, because that's what we all dream about as educators, but also as Who's. I am so thankful to my education here at UVA in architecture. It taught me how to collaborate, it taught me how to ideate, it taught me how to look at the world in a really specific and special way. And then going off and having a career, I really believed I could do it because of this place. And to come back to UVA and then to work with such amazing colleagues, it's really a magical space. And I have to also give kudos, I'm big on this, for Professor Riley right now, as I hold up your book. Professor Riley created this ecosystem. On my second week back here at UVA, I met Professor Riley, and you had created strategies for interpretation as a new class. And you were working with Highland the year before. And so we were very lucky. All of a sudden, I have a museum background. Professor Riley has this incredible ecosystem of learning that she's created. And we worked together. How many I've lost track of how many classes. Our fifth class
wow.
teaching together. Right. We're teaching 2 classes together now. And what we wanted to do in the class is to really prepare students to think about the real world application, but also to think that design is, as Brianna eloquently said, is for everyone. There's this beautiful moment in design where you think about stakeholders. We all can say our favorite museum that we go to, our favorite place. It connects with us. It's a moment of family. It connects us together. And so we wanted to create that actually in our space as well. And so I was able to transfer my history with design thinking. You've probably heard a lot about design thinking, this idea of how we can connect in business and also in education and medicine. But for designers, it's this idea of looking at deep empathy. How do you identify your needs? How do you collect and research? How do you analyze what you found, prototype, and test? And so what a gift to come back to my home school and to share what I've learned in the museum field. You can see a lot of the images that are scrolling by behind us. And so what you realize is students worked as mini design museum companies, so to speak. Yours was contemporary, right? You named yourselves. After reading the book and taking this in and thinking about references, the different teams actually worked and crafted exhibition briefs. So we talked about all the basics, stakeholders, budget, materials, how you'd flow through. It really focused on visitor experience. We all know what it's like. You go to a great exhibit, you go through it, you stop, you start talking with strangers, right? You start talking about memories that you had sitting in front of the Woolworth Building. There are these moments of connection that we wanted to create within the Fralin itself. But you know, it wasn't hard to go very far. You're probably noticing that if you look at the book cover, the colors are all here. This is evening sky. By the way, if you want to redo your house, I have all the colors for you. You got evening sky here. You've got limon here on the side, which is the color of all the text. You have, Brianna just pointed this out, all the motifs of the buildings are here. We wanted it to feel like it was part of a design family, so you'd see the book, you feel connected to it. And then the next time you're back in New York City, you connect back to when you see a building, or in Atlanta. The idea that all of a sudden there's this connection, and that research really came from my background and what we were able to do in the class.
So a word that we use within the museum, particularly in academic museums, that you might not necessarily associate with a museum is a laboratory. And I think you're really getting a sense of what we mean when my colleagues and I discuss the Fralin as a laboratory for learning. It's a place of curiosity and discovery and experimentation, exactly like these classes that Lisa and Elgin, and in particular the design class for this exhibition, also create within the classroom space. So it's been this really remarkable and successful collaboration because we're really approaching these ideas from the same space, and so it was really seamless bringing them together. So as the students divided themselves into separate design groups, each tasked with various aspects of the exhibition, each approaching it with very different ideas. One of the things that we should also point out, you probably think that they're all architecture students or design students or architectural historians. These students come from across the university with their various disciplines and backgrounds. And that, I think, is one of the true successes of what you see in the exhibition. We have so many levels of expertise and interest at play from the foundation of the design that then can come together in a kind of wonderful mosaic of the final design. And that's exactly, again, how we think about the academic museum today. It's a very different model. We don't just work with our art historians and archaeologists and anthropologists. Of course, we love them, and they're part of our core audience. But you know, the Fralin collaborates with about 40 different departments across the university on a regular basis as that kind of laboratory hub space. And this is really, you know, not only, I guess we kind of used to think of it as the future of education. I think that future is here now, but it's why courses such as Lisa and Elgin's are so important, and why I think the museum can be such an incredible resource and collaborator, and why we want to move forward in this way. So as the students were coming together in their design groups, they were also getting the real world experience of the designer-client relationship, the client being the Fralin. So my colleagues, Laura Minton, who's our curator of exhibitions, Chris Minot, who's our lead preparator, and myself, came in at certain touch points during the semester to have professional level, truly, and I'm not, you know, over egging the pudding here. We were flabbergasted at how professional these presentations were by these students, a mix of undergraduate and graduate students. So they would present to us, and then we would give them our feedback, our unvarnished feedback. We were very honest when things didn't work, but we were very honest when we loved things. And we built, I think we came in 3 or 4 times during the class, and each time we were just amazed at the new level, how they had taken our suggestions, our critiques, completely internalized them, and then built on them and given us something new. It was a really tremendous experience. And again, that level of real world experience that is so critical to someone like Brianna and her peers. Anything else? What else about the course really struck any of you?
Well, one thing that I thought was really compelling was the students' interest in really setting the stage and fully integrating all the aspects from, as Elgin was saying, the font, the colors. They designed the banners in the entrance hall, the motifs going up the stairs, decorations for the elevator, so that you created this kind of atmosphere, commensurate with these buildings and with the themes of the exhibition. So thinking not just, where do we put the piece of furniture and how do we arrange that, but how do we create this exhibition that visually reinforces the message of the exhibition in all of its aspects?
Yeah, so, go ahead, Elgin.
We're very thankful for the Jefferson Trust
Yes.
funding,
Right.
which allowed us to take field trips. We went to see the Hopper show at the VMFA, and so all of a sudden it put things into place. This idea of what visitor experience is like, we actually just modeled it. We went down, we visited for the day, and we saw the flow through the exhibition and thought about references of scale or moments that really would connect. We also connected with Brent Ward of Riggs Ward out of Richmond as well, and learned a bit more about the expanse of these deep stories through their work there. So there really was an incredible moment to have professionals also coming into the classroom.
Well, we should also add that the Trust funded 2 internships this summer for 2 students who were able to actually fabricate the design work of the course with Chris Minot, who I think it's fair to say was over the moon about working with our students on this. And it was a great opportunity for them to kind of go through the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I will say, halfway through the install, I asked Chris how it was going with Kara and Caroline. And he said, we laugh all day long. He said, it's just been the most enjoyable experience I've ever had in my professional career. So it was, I want to underline, as important as it has been for the students, it has been equally important for us at the museum, particularly through the last year when we were closed for 17 months for building work. We've all been through the pandemic and the stresses of the last year, bringing students back in this significant way and with this much joy. One of the students, I won't call her out in case it would embarrass her, one of the students who was working on the exhibition towards the end, in the final weeks, I would come into the museum and she would be skipping everywhere. She didn't just walk through the galleries, which as a museum professional is horrifying because you could knock into something and you're not supposed to skip, you're supposed to walk very methodically, very carefully through the objects. But I couldn't bring myself to say, really you should be walking, not skipping, because it was such a joyous experience for me seeing the level of joy she was experiencing in this work. And I think we were talking briefly before, 3.5, 4 years ago when we started thinking about this, of course, we had no idea what the circumstances would be today as the exhibition opened. While there are certainly, darker and negative sides to the production of skyscrapers, which are explored in the exhibition, there is a lot of positivity. The skyscraper, at least in popular culture of the day, and I think continues to be a symbol of optimism. The Empire State Building goes up at the height of the Depression, this unbelievable technological engineering achievement. These buildings are soaring into the sky. They still, even though the Empire State Building is tiny compared to contemporary skyscrapers, the Chrysler Building is tiny compared to contemporary skyscrapers, you still get that feeling of exhilaration as you look at them, that they are soaring into the sky. And so we couldn't have known 3.5, 4 years ago, what we now know is how much we would all need that optimism that comes through the exhibition and comes through so much of the materials, and that sense of the period eye that you can enter into the exhibition with. So a wonderful synchronicity that it's opening at this moment. Very difficult to some more background just out of interest. Very difficult to curate an exhibition in the final stages during a global pandemic when all research travel is cut. So Lisa and Kevin and I had all of these fabulous trips planned to museums to look through their collections. None of that could happen. Everything had to be done in the final stages by whatever photography of objects we could get from our colleague institutions, which is very difficult. You don't quite know what you're going to get in the end when the object arrives. Fortunately, it was all happy surprises, but there were real surprises, like the wonderful scale that we have that from, I think most of us are old enough to remember when there were scales in public spaces. And these were these fabulous 1930s scales that were in these buildings. Well, we knew the scale was beautiful. We knew it looked like a skyscraper. We knew it had this beautiful metalwork, very futuristic. What we didn't know, because we couldn't go and see them in person, we didn't see that in the photos that were given to us, was that the footpad is this beautiful rubber stenciled lettering, cut lettering, that says "Step on Me" in this fabulous kind of script. And it was, I think we all, like when we entered into the gallery after this huge object had been uncrated, we kind of gasped, and then we were giddy like children. It was just, and we had a number of those throughout the installation process.
Absolutely. Things that we thought would look great looked even better when we unpacked them. I was really happy.
I'm going to tell you, so evening sky, that's the color.
Evening sky.
Evening sky, which is the color of the galleries, is the best color. I've been working in museums for 25 years. The most objects look the best I've ever seen objects look against this color. So if you're looking for a new living room color, if you're looking for a new, it's going to seem very dark. I can tell you anything you put on it will look fantastic.
It's Benjamin Moore.
Benjamin Moore, I know.
Like to make
Benjamin Moore, if you'd like to sponsor a gallery at a museum, we're happy to be in touch. But yeah, Benjamin Moore, Evening Sky. I just did a bunch of painting in my house, and I'm already about thinking that I'm going to need to repaint. Anything else? We're coming to the end. We're going to get to some questions. Anything that we haven't covered? Yeah, Elgin.
I wanted to say one more thing about these two amazing moments you're seeing going by in the images. One in construction, there's an I-beam bench that students created. And so we talked a lot about that feeling. If anyone's been to the top of the Rockefeller, they have this moment in the floor where you feel like you can walk balanced on an I-beam, and there's a projection that you're going to fall down. We all know what it's like in a lot of tall buildings. There's this moment to make you think about height. And so students brilliantly in that group thought about this I-beam bench, and when you see it, it's magical. Beyond you is a video that plays of the construction of the Empire State Building. And then there's a moment for you to think about the materials and the Bessemer process in the front. There's the step on it. You can see there.
Right, step.
We had to restrain ourselves
Because
we're not allowed to step.
Yes, even the curators and the director are not allowed to step on the scale.
And another great moment here, students design these bases, and the bases really evoke the kind of step back and the Ferris on the actual ideas of these bases for the artifacts. They're really spectacular moments that not only just add, but they really bring everything together through form. And they really make this moment a visitor experience where you go through where you're thinking about the scaling of skyscrapers into the replication and actually the designs of the space. This is another great example where they've made a platform to really make it feel more domestic. These cues are really magical in the show, but they really showcase, the creativity of students, and we really are thankful for them.
I don't know, did we talk about the elevator? Because that's also one of my favorites. So you mentioned, the elevator, when you come over to the Fralin, it's a short one flight. You could easily take the stairs, take the elevator. Because, one of the things, it was fascinating for, I think, all of us. Also take the stairs, yes. Take the stairs down, because there's another moment on the stairs. Good point. But, I think for all of us involved, seeing what the students really focused on, what captured their imaginations was fascinating. And one of the things was the elevator. Of course, the skyscraper couldn't have existed without the modern elevator, so it's very important. And as one of these wonders of the new modern world, elevators themselves became objects of decoration, objects of art. If you've ever been in any of these Art Deco elevators, and in fact, we found there are websites devoted to them around the world because they are so beautiful. Particularly, I think the one we probably all think about immediately are the Chrysler elevators, which you can't get into. These are not truly public spaces anymore. So the students had, and really pushed for, this is one of the design ideas they really pushed for, was that in some way we decorate the interior and even the doors of the elevator at the museum to evoke these grand, small, but grand spaces that are at the heart of the skyscraper. And I'm so glad, I have to say I was not sold on the idea eventually. That was not one of I was like, that's gonna be a lot of money and a lot of hard work. But I am so glad that the students really, really insisted on it. It makes it, and now the number one comment is, you're going to keep the wallpaper in the elevators, right? So I encourage you to take the elevator to see more student brilliance at work.
Yeah, if I might add, I do remember fighting very passionately for that moment, just because that is, if you were alive in this watershed moment we've been talking about, you could walk into that skyscraper and feel that opulence and understand the communication of success and ornate classicism or innovation, depending on the building. But really, we wanted to give the visitor the opportunity to put themselves in the shoes of someone in 1913, 1922, when they could walk into this building and simply be awestruck, because, I mean, they're incomparable, really. And
these buildings were events. Entering into these buildings were events. They had approaches. The architects were thinking about, from the moment you crossed the threshold, how you would be embraced by the building. I think about, like, how many buildings do you have that experience in today? Not at all, right? And I think, again, that's what speaks to why you're all here, why you were interested in this talk, why so many people are interested in the exhibition, because you know that. This was a moment when entering a building was an event.
Well, also just the fact that these were public spaces
Right.
and were intended to be grand, and
Right.
now they've almost all been shut. But the other thing I realized we haven't talked about is the lighting.
Oh.
The lighting of these buildings was really a huge deal. That's actually from a lighting catalog, the cover that a member of the UVA Press staff found for us. But one of Brianna's colleagues actually worked on lighting for his research paper. And what we uncovered was, initially people were just using floodlight. And I mentioned that Woodrow Wilson flicked the switch somehow from the White House that turned the lights on. But the next iteration, and we see this at the Radiator Building, is that the architects worked with lighting designers from theaters to create dramatic lighting and realized that the setbacks gave them the opportunity for very dramatic lighting in a kind of targeted way, working with these theatrical designers. So that whole idea of the lit crowns that we now see as so distinctive across skylines, this is a moment where new technologies are harnessed to achieve that and continue this idea of a distinctive building that serves as an emblem. The Radiator Building was seen as looking like a radiator at night as well as during the day.
And it's also, that evolution has continued because now we have the evolution into LED lighting. And next time you're in New York, make sure to look up at the Empire State Building and these kind of grand, both color and illumination effects that they can achieve on all of these buildings now. It's really spectacular.
Just recalling that after a conversation with Professor Riley, you'll find that all the text is this color, which is, by the way, Limon by Benjamin Moore. And the idea that this color then really becomes a way to talk about all the buildings, and you can see them really glowing off of the wall to kind of make you think about the glow of these incredible moments.
it's also a really incredible way to communicate how iconic these buildings are, but also how incredible all of these objects are. And like we've said, this color is an incredible isolating and highlighting moment for these pieces that really encapsulates just how iconic and representative these skyscrapers are and were and continue to be.
Absolutely. I think we have time for a few questions. I believe there are 2 standing mics. You want people to go to the mics, Althea, because so people online, our 400 plus guests online, can hear. So if you want to make your way, if anyone has questions, if you want to start making your way to the mics, are you making your way to the mic? I think you're first. Great.
Hello. Were there any escalators involved in these Art Deco buildings?
Not that I'm aware of, but I have to say, I didn't look into the history of the escalators, the elevators. I think
Yeah, I think.
escalators are like a department store thing because they want you to take an escalator so you see what's for sale on the other floors.
And I would doubt that, again, as the non-architectural historian, I'll speak. I would doubt that. I would think that, because we think about the Macy's elevator, the old wooden elevator that's still in operation. I would wonder if they could even make them long enough, really, to be maybe to a kind of first floor mezzanine if you were in a lobby, but beyond that.
Because like HKSB has escalators, right? It's the beginning of it, which is a famous skyscraper now in Hong Kong. But the real focus was on moving people quickly up to these higher floors. This is like the big discussion, is how are you going to get people up and down safely through these spaces, rather than the idea that, an escalator kind of gives you that exhibition sense of the people on the escalator and the objects they're seeing.
And I also think, we have probably perhaps been a little too optimistic. Skyscrapers weren't really embraced in the beginning. I mean, there was a lot of anxiety around skyscrapers, around fire. What would happen if there was a fire? Thinking about the Great Chicago Fire was looming in people's minds. But also, to this point of, you're going to build a building how high? How are you going to get people up to the top floors in any kind of efficient way? So there was a lot to overcome in those early years in the public imagination, right?
Right, and some people do write pretty negative articles about how it's destroying the way the city looks, but also this is a moment where women start to enter the workforce in a new way. You see things like filing cabinets are invented. There's a great podcast that just came out about the invention of the filing cabinet. All kinds of things change. And one of the concerns was that working at height would be very stressful for women who were regarded as frail at this point, and they had special lounges in some buildings where they could rest.
From the stress of the Otis elevator.
Right, as part of their working day. So.
Right. Great, thank you. Great question. Next.
What do you think of American culture, ethos, whatever, led to the skyscraper starting here as opposed to in another place?
Well, I mean, you can probably answer this too. I mean, I think our cities were really people are moving to cities. Chicago burns down, basically, so they need to build new buildings. And as there's increasing numbers of people moving, and then this great push towards industrialization and businesses with offices, there's an idea that this land is valuable and scarce, and so you're going to maximize it by building these taller buildings that combines with the invention of the safety elevator by Otis and the Bessemer steel process that makes the framework. So that's all kind of what's at work here. European cities are pretty dense already at this point, but I think also the push towards business that we see in America wasn't happening in quite the same way. But
I'm just agreeing with you. This is our collaboration at work.
But I would also say in Europe, I mean, there were up until recently in major cities like London, really restrictive height laws because they didn't, and I can speak to the London because I lived there, as late as, I moved there in 1999, as late as 1999, you still couldn't build a building that would obscure the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, and it wasn't, and that's why when you go to London and you see where the very new, all built within the last 20 years, true skyscrapers are, they're still out from the real city center. Some now have encroached, one does kind of encroach in some ways on the view, and I think those laws have been relaxed somewhat, but we're talking just over 20 years ago, you still had laws in place in one of the great cities of the world that nothing could be taller than St. Paul's Dome.
It is interesting also to think about the shift of skyscrapers into sustainability and really thinking about the materials themselves, because the materials sourcing is another thing to really think about the distance, CO2.
Well, yeah, because now there's the push for wooden frame skyscrapers that began in Japan as a more sustainable form of construction than the production of the steel frame. And we actually do have, I mean, I don't know if we call it a skyscraper, but we have a taller building. I think we could say in Charlottesville that McDonough Associates are putting up with a wooden frame structure. And that's kind of taken place in Japan most of all, I think, but it's taking place here. So these changes in the building technology. Good point.
Great. I don't know who's.
I see that your book speaks to, as you put it, specific concerns about capitalism, branding, even, I would say, conveying a kind of a new quality of this, an abundance of American life. But this is, of course, a period in which there's a lot of boom and bust and a lot of questioning of capitalism, whether it can survive or not. One of my distant cousins was lead architect on one of the more humble of these designs, Era's designs, where specific branding wasn't involved. And I wonder if you speak also either in the exhibit or the book to the broader issues, almost like kind of religious mysticism and power, and that some of these, maybe not the architects, but the capitalists who commissioned the buildings and hired the architects were concerned about.
The book, which shamelessly
Our seventh plug for the book.
I have to tell you, one of my own children recently said to me, "You never gave me this book. I think it's the only one of your books I'd actually read." So I thought, well, she'll read it. Anybody will read it, right? But at any rate, one of the things that I think the essays in the book make clear, which are written by all different people, some of the students from this course and some other experts on these buildings, is that the Gothic, it's one of those things that can mean all things to all people. And in some cases, with the Chicago Tribune in particular, regardless of the architect's intention, the owners of the Tribune invoke the Gothic as a kind of moral architecture and use it to reinforce a certain moral message that they want to convey. So it's not so much the mysticism aspect, I would say, but seeing this as this kind of pure moral moment and something that the United States wants to align itself with at this time. There's another article about Chicago by Joanna Merwood Salisbury, who talks about how there's labor unrest at this time, and the Gothic again is invoked as a time, I mean, as somebody who works on the Gothic, these are complete fantasies, but as a kind of, happy craftsman worker being well rewarded and kind of trying to evoke that sense about it. So I think, it's not so much the mysticism aspect, but other parts related to the religiosity and the spirituality do come out, although a lot of it had to do with this, a certain theory about structural rationalism that led to some of the early innovations with them as well. So it's kind of all different kinds of things. Does that answer your question? It's a great question. Thank you.
It's a great question. I think we'll take one last question from the room, and then we have a couple from online that we'll get to.
So by definition, Gothic skyscrapers are limited to certain areas, large urban areas like New York City. I'm curious what's the impression to someplace like Charlottesville, to people here at the time? Was there a trickle-down impact that makes this a movement of importance to local people?
Well, you'll see in our postcard display in particular, as collected by another child. I might add in a shameless plug for my children. Remember, who was it in the seminar worked on Richmond and some examples of these buildings in the South?
Well, Atlanta City Hall is definitely a great example.
And there's one in Winston-Salem, the Reynolds buildings. So, and Akron, another example, Indianapolis, lots of smaller cities had these buildings, and they are seen as a way to make your city look modern. And like New York, a great business center. That's what Atlanta's really pushing itself as a business center. So they're kind of, literature about themselves is highlighting that. And then there's no reason for a setback building in Atlanta at this point. There's like acres around the structure, it's on a plain. But they deliberately choose something that very much looks like these in their bid to be the New York of the South at the time. So there is that.
Well, I would also want to add, it's difficult to say what might have happened, but realistically, the skyscraper boom and all of this culture that comes with it is kind of stopped dead in its tracks by the Great Depression and the fact that, excess spending is done, basically.
Right.
And so there's not a space for an elaborate, I'm running out of words here, but, a beautiful building that speaks to more than just function. So you're realistically it's so fascinating to look at this period in particular because it is so cut off in terms of production and material culture. You see this really interesting break, and then what might have continued is really, really difficult to say. There's no way to really know how far it could have gone had economic success continued. And I think that's just one of the really, really interesting things about this sort of movement as well, and why the skyscraper Gothic as a style isn't connected to these more modern and streamlined forms, even though it is evoking a very linear and geometric sort of style. It cuts off and then.
And as you're speaking, I'm reminding myself of the CNB building in Richmond, project of skyscraper. The Allied building in Richmond was a modernistic skyscraper.
They're everywhere.
So, yeah, there are.
Yeah.
Well, and also to think that, at the beginning of the movement towards the skyscraper, 10 stories can qualify. So what we think of now as a skyscraper is completely different from what would qualify back then, and we would see as a small office building. Right. So.
And that's, again, why I'm taking Brianna on the road with me from here on out, because she perfectly segued into the one online question that I thought for sure we would get in the room, but because we didn't, I will answer one of the questions that was submitted previously by our online audience, which is what was the first skyscraper? Which, of course, anytime you're trying to find the first, it's going to be hotly debated. So it was Chicago. I mean, we think Chicago or the one that...
We don't know.
We don't know. All right. So the architectural historian will say we don't know. Wikipedia will tell you that it's the home insurance building in Chicago in 1884, which was 10 stories. And that was another question from the online audience, what constitutes a skyscraper? So in 1884, 10 stories was a skyscraper. So now, with that information, with your fantastic question, as you look around, urban centers throughout the country, buildings that you hadn't thought of as skyscrapers might very well have been read as skyscrapers in their time. So look for that. Look for the Gothic detailing. Look for the step-back profile. That's really, the major things that they're trying to replicate as modern. One of the great, and then I'll end, one of the great of many discoveries for me and being very ancillary to this project is that Atlanta, for a time, was promoting itself as the New York of the South, which if you know Atlanta and you know the South, it's so incongruous for me that was part of their City Hall building, right? Another essay, exactly. So we're going to wrap up. I just want to remind everyone that we will be in the exhibition at the Fralin from around 11:30 to 1. If any of you are planning to stop by, you can ask more questions. We're not giving a tour or anything. We're just there to talk, answer any questions that you might have, discuss anything that you might have. The Fralin is on Rugby Road. It's 155 Rugby Road. Just up or down, I don't know what direction that is, but from the rotunda, not far from here. For those of you that know the Fralin well, you know that we are parking light on any given day. I don't know what the situation is with Culbreth Garage at this time. I don't know if they blocked that off or not. Probably not this early. I don't know. Does anyone know? But you might try Culbreth Garage. It's a beautiful day, and it's about 15-minute walk. You might walk across grounds as well. But we encourage you to come over and see the exhibition. If not today, it will be up through December 31st. And we are open today, what's today, Saturday, until 5. And you can find our regular hours online. So thank you all. This has been such a delight. I have to say, every UVA audience just kind of blows me away by the level of interest and questions that you have. Really appreciate the level of attention you give when you come to hear panels like this, and the really insightful questions that you ask. It makes our jobs just so much more delightful and easy. So thank you all, and we look really forward to seeing you in the galleries. And just to make it an, I think, even number of 8, please buy the book. 9, okay, odd number of 9. I'll turn it back over to our colleagues at Lifetime Learning. Oh, thank you so much, thank you.
Yes, thank you to all the speakers. We have a little gift for you. And this program is put on by Lifetime Learning in partnership with the Alumni Association. So we want to thank everyone for coming out with their masks on and joining us online as well. And the bookstore is up here selling the books. So we'll see you. Have a good day, and go Who's.
Yeah, absolutely.